Okay, so let's talk about functions now. I made a little example that's pretty similar to the mini project, and the mini project is pretty similar to project 3 to help you work through the function making part. So first, we're gonna learn how to make functions, and to do that, we have a little example here. So we have three fluids, fluid 1, 2, 3, and these three fluids have empirical parameters A and B. Now we have an imaginary property called prop that has a function t times a squared plus t over b, and that's just an imaginary property. Now what we want to do is we're going to create a Matlab function that calculates property for us when we give them a, b, and t. And we want to do this for fluid 1, 2, 3 all at once. So the first thing that I'm going to show you guys is that when we have a table like this or information like this, we can just input our data in vector form, which just makes a vector. And we're going to know that the first input of the vector is going to correspond to fluid 1, and then the second to fluid 2, and the third one to fluid 3. So we're going to create a vector called A, and that is going to be 0.5, 0.17, and 0.83. Then we're going to create a vector called B with the second set of empirical parameters, which is going to be 7.4, 10.8, and then 4.6. And so those are two parameters, and now we're gonna give it a temperature. So the temperature can be a range of temperatures, also a vector, or it can be just one temperature. In our case, we're just gonna do it at one temperature, which is gonna say that the temperature is 80 degrees. So now we're gonna leave this evaluate the property for the last part, and we're now gonna create a function. So there are several ways to create Matlab functions. You can either put them inside your code, which we're gonna do right now, and is what you want to do for your project. But I'm also gonna teach you how to do them in scripts, which sometimes is more useful if you have a lot of functions. So in order to create a function, we're going to use the word function, of course. And the first thing that we add is square brackets. And what is going to go into these square brackets is all of the variables that we're going to be outputting, which in this case is just the value of property. Then we're going to say equal sign, and we're going to give it we're going to give our function a name. In my case, I'm just going to call it my prop. For our mini project 1, you're going to call it Antoine T and then Antoine P. For my case, we're just going to give it my prop 1, and then you open parentheses, and you're going to tell Matlab what you're going to input to this function. In this case, we're going to input A, we're going to input B, and we're going to input T, which is the same thing that's going to be for the mini project. So for the mini project, you have to have inputs A, B, C, and then either T or P. So again, you write the word function. In the square brackets, you create an output, so what your function is supposed to output, and then you say equal sign, the name of your function, which in this case is called my prop, and then the inputs to this function. A function always has to have an end, so don't forget to put the end, and then in between, we're going to write the mathematical formula. So in this case, we're going to write prop, and then we're just going to run this equation, which is t times a squared plus t over b. So since in this case b and a are vectors and t is a scalar, we're going to have to add our periods again here, so don't forget to do that. Basically, what adding these dots here allow us to do is to evaluate one by one. So it's going to go and it's going to grab a1, and it's going to do t times a1 squared plus t over b1. So we are ensuring that we're doing this property calculation for each one of the fluids, if that makes sense. So now that's it. That's all you need to do to create a function. So we see that before we've learned how to create anonymous functions, we require the use of the @ sign, and you didn't have to use the word function, you just made it. It's an anonymous function. You could put it anywhere. Now these are actual Matlab functions that you're going to be able to use throughout your code. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But something that's very important is when you use live scripts, your functions always have to go at the end of your code. And this is why in my template and in the project 3 template, the spaces for the functions are at the end. So even when you're using the functions earlier in the code, Matlab always reads functions first, even if they're at the end. So always put them at the end. Now that we have created the function, we can go ahead and answer the question. I actually should have used this space. That's okay. Okay, so now that we have defined our parameters and we have created our function, now we can go ahead and use the function. So the question asks us, the task is to create a function to calculate prop, which is here, and calculate its value for fluids 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to save the information on the parameters a and b at vector form, which is what we already did. So now let's find the property for fluid 1, 2, and 3. So to do this, it's very easy. We just go prop. We can call it property actually to make it a little different, but it's not necessary. Let's call it proper. And proper is gonna be equal to my prop, which is the new function you created. When you type it, you'll see that you're gonna highlight it on your code as well. And then you have to input a, comma, b, and then comma, t. And then that's it. Now, if we save this code and we run it, let's clear everything. I had already run it before. So let's just clear all. And let's run it. So what we see is that, again, what we expected, A is a vector that has the properties for all the 3 fluids. Now B is a vector, it has the properties of all the 3 fluids. And now proper is a vector. Proper is a vector that's gonna have, and we're gonna be able to see it down here. Let's run it again so it shows here. Okay, now proper is also a vector that has the values for this property for fluid 1, fluid 2, and fluid 3. So that's all we have to do. If we want to make it a little bit more clear and separate them, we can say fluid 1 is equal to proper 1, fluid 2 is equal to proper 2. And then same for 3. So for those of you who are not familiar with vector notation, basically what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, Matlab, clear a variable called fluid 1, and then give it the value of proper, the first element. Now fluid 2, proper, the second element. Fluid 3, proper, the third element. What this parenthesis allows us to do is to go to that vector and find the third element, the second element, and then so forth and so on. So let's run again. So now we see that our proper vector, now it's like a fluid 1, fluid 2, and fluid 3, and now we have our 3 properties. Something else that we could do is that we can actually just evaluate. So this is the fast way to do it, in which you evaluate a function for in vector, like for the whole vector itself. What you could do also is you could say f fluid, let's call it f since we already used fluid. We're going to call it f1 is going to be equal to, so my prop is the name of my function, right? So my prop. And then you can say, and then you can give it the values itself. So you can say a1, a2, and b2 actually, and then t. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to evaluate this myprop function for only these values. So it's going to say, oh, t times a1, which is 0.5, plus t over b2, which is over b, which is 7.4. So we're getting values a1 and b1, which are 0.5 and 7.4, and we are evaluating the function with those values. So now if we run it, we should get the same number for the 2 ways we calculated. So here we calculate in vector form, and you see it's very easy and short, and here we calculate it one by one. So if we wanted to do the same thing but using this notation, then we would have to do it 3 times. If that makes sense. So something else about functions is that, so how you are supposed to do it in the project is to put them, embed them in your live script, but functions can also be written in separate scripts. So if we create a script right now, and we create a function, now we save it. So something that's important is that the name of the file has to be the same as the name of the function for it to work. So you'll see that now you created a file that has an fx here, which is a function. So now you can use the function in any of your scripts. And that comes in really handy when you're making a code that has a lot of functions, and maybe you don't want to write them all in your main code, and you just want to have them as separate files and then use them later. So now that I have it saved here as a function, I can use my prop anytime. And you can use in the command window or in other scripts, which comes in really handy. As I said before, you're not going to have to do this in your project, but it's something that's important to know. So for your project, again, you're going to want to put them at the end. So that's how you create Matlab functions. In the next mini project, we're going to tackle some other tasks you need to know, but for now, you should be able to do the first part of project 3.